The moment Rachel pressed play, everything changed. Her late husband Walter's voice, soft but deliberate, echoed through the room. "If Rachel's hearing this, then you must have tried to erase her, but I made sure she'd know the truth." The fork of Griffin, Walter's eldest son, slipped from his hand and clattered onto the plate. Edith, Walter's mother, froze mid-sentence. 2 weeks earlier, at Walter's funeral, Edith had leaned in close to Rachel and hissed, "You are just a nurse who married my son." Then, without warning, she stood up and slapped her. Just hours later, Rachel found herself locked out of the only home she had known for 30 years. The locks were changed, her name was wiped away as if she had never existed. She thought she had lost everything. Until she opened Walter's old tackle box and discovered what he had left behind. On the day of the funeral, heavy with unspoken grief, Rachel stood motionless beside the mahogany casket. Her husband, Walter Foster, has become just a memory. Her face remained composed. Years of professional training had taught her to maintain calm in the face of death. But inside, her heart was collapsing like a house of cards. Across the room, Walter's mother, 78-year-old Edith Foster, sat with dignity in a black designer dress. She was dabbing at eyes that remained suspiciously dry. Standing next to her was Griffin, Walter's 34-year-old oldest son, his expression a perfect mask of appropriate sadness. Noah, the 31-year-old second son, stood somewhat apart from the window. When his gaze briefly met Rachel's, there was something there, perhaps guilt. Before he quickly looked away, Rachel felt the weight of isolation even in this crowded room. The whispers had started even before Walter's body was cold. As Rachel moved to accept condolences, she overheard Edith speaking to an old family friend. "Caroline would have maintained more dignity," Edith whispered, referring to Walter's first wife. "Her family were all physicians, you know. Not like, well, some end-of-life caretaker who managed to work her way in." The words pierced Rachel's heart like shards of ice, but she kept her composure. She had endured worse in hospital corridors. Yet never had the words cut so deeply, never had they come from someone who was supposed to be family. Rachel gently touched the silver locket around her neck, Walter's gift on their 25th anniversary. Inside was a photo of them on their wedding day, both smiling despite Edith's visible disapproval in the background. That day, Walter had whispered, "You're my choice, Rachel. Always remember that." Hours later, as night settled in, Rachel drove home, looking forward to the comfort of Walter's pillow that still carried his scent. When she arrived, her key no longer worked in the front door. Confusion gave way to disbelief as she tried again and again. The familiar lock that had welcomed her home countless times now rejected her. Mrs. Peterson, their longtime housekeeper, approached with a small box in her hands and dismay written across her face. "Rachel, I'm so sorry." Edith gave instructions. The older woman couldn't meet Rachel's eyes. "There are just a few of Walter's personal items." Rachel's hands trembled as she accepted the box. 30 years reduced to a container she could carry in one arm. Through the large bay window, Rachel could see Edith and Griffin walking through the living room with a real estate agent. Edith was gesturing at the antique bookcase where Rachel had displayed her nursing awards alongside Walter's business achievements. Rachel's awards had already been removed. And there, by the window, stood Noah, his expression torn. Their eyes met through the glass before he turned away sharply. In that fleeting connection, Rachel saw something beyond guilt, perhaps a promise. Rachel felt as if she were watching her life being erased in real time. 30 years of memories, all being wiped away as if she had never existed. She had to move to a small, unfamiliar space. An apartment that felt sterile and empty. Rachel unpacked the few belongings she had managed to take. One suitcase of clothes, a few books, and the small box of Walter's items. She noticed with bitter irony that she had only managed to grab one of her favorite shoes from the entryway. One shoe, useless without its pair, much like how she felt then, incomplete without Walter. The silence in that strange place was suffocating. At home, silence had been comfortable. It was a shared language between her and Walter. There, it felt accusatory, highlighting everything she had lost. A courier's envelope arrived with the law firm's letterhead. Rachel opened it with trembling hands. The formal legal language couldn't disguise the cruelty. By order of Edith Foster, we must inform you that your residency at the Foster family home is hereby terminated. One cold line particularly stood out. Now that my son is gone, there is no reason for you to remain in that house. Rachel sank onto the unfamiliar couch, the letter falling from her fingers. The pain of losing Walter was now compounded by this betrayal, this erasure of her very existence in their shared life. She touched her locket again, seeking strength in Walter's memory. I'm losing everything we built together. Hours later, as the evening deepened, Rachel finally opened the small box of Walter's belongings. Inside were a few cufflinks, his favorite pen, and a sealed envelope with her name written in his familiar handwriting. She traced the letters of her name, written in Walter's distinctive slant. With shaking fingers, she broke the seal. My dearest Rachel. If you're reading this, they must have already tried to take everything from you. But I've prepared for this. Find the recorder in my fishing tackle box. All my love, always. Walter. Rachel caught her breath. The fishing tackle box, one of the few things she had managed to grab. Walter had loved fishing in his younger days, though he rarely had time for it in recent years. She retrieved the worn wooden box from her small collection of salvaged items. The box itself was a testament to Walter's meticulous nature, each compartment perfectly organized, each tool in its designated place. At the bottom, she found an old photograph of Walter with Griffin and Noah, all smiling broadly and holding up a large fish. The happiness in their faces was unmarred by the complications that would later divide them. Rachel's fingertips lingered on Walter's smiling face, remembering how his eyes would crinkle at the corners when he laughed. And there, beneath the photo, was a small voice recorder. Rachel felt a flicker of hope ignite within her chest. Walter had known this might happen. He had prepared something. And whatever was on this recorder might be the key to reclaiming what was rightfully hers, not just material possessions, but her dignity and place in the family she had devoted herself to for 30 years. As she held the recorder in her palm, determination replaced despair in Rachel's heart. With a deep breath, she pressed the play button, ready to hear her husband's voice one last time, and perhaps, find a way forward through the darkness that had engulfed her. Walter's voice filled the small apartment. Weak but determined. It was a voice she had thought she would never hear again. Day 17 of Palliative Care Journal. Pain level is at 6 today. The new medication Dr. Sullivan prescribed is helping somewhat. Rachel caught her breath in her throat. This was from just 2 months ago, when Walter was still strong enough to sit up in bed. It was when they still believed he could live for another year. The recording continued, Walter methodically noting his symptoms, medications, and thoughts, always the investment consultant, organizing information even in his final days. Then suddenly, other voices intruded. The recorder had apparently been left running during a visit. When Walter's gone, we'll need to move quickly. It was Edith's unmistakable crisp tone. That woman has no right to the house. It's been in our family for generations. She's been with Father for 30 years, came Noah's voice, sounding uncertain. Griffin's dismissive laugh followed. As his nurse, then his wife. Convenient career advancement, wouldn't you say? The will complicates things, Edith continued. But there are ways around that. I've spoken with Harrison. Once Walter passes, we'll have her removed before she can cause problems. Rachel's hand flew to her mouth, stifling a gasp. The casual cruelty in their voices was shocking, even after everything. The voices faded as they apparently left the room. Then Walter's labored breathing could be heard, followed by a weak cough. Rachel recognized the sound. He had been pretending to sleep while they talked beside his bed. After a long pause, Walter's voice returned, noticeably weaker. "Rachel, if you're hearing this, they don't know I'm awake. This isn't the first time they've discussed this. There's more evidence, but I don't have much time. Observe Noah, pay attention to Noah." The recording ended abruptly. In the heavy stillness that followed, Rachel replayed the recording 3 times, her professional mind analyzing every detail despite her emotional turmoil. The subtle mechanical whirring in the background, was it some kind of medical equipment? Walter's breathing patterns suggested he was in considerable pain but trying to hide it. And what did he mean about Noah? The younger son had always been quieter, less assertive than Griffin. During Walter's illness, Noah had visited frequently but rarely when his grandmother and brother were present. Rachel remembered something else, Noah fiddling with a small device beside Walter's bed. She had assumed it was a phone, but now she sank back into the couch, overwhelmed. The recording proved their intentions, but not their actions. It wouldn't be enough in court to challenge her eviction. And, observed Noah, remained a puzzle. The apartment walls seemed to close in around her. For 30 years, she had been Walter's partner, confidant, and finally, his caregiver. Now these people, his family, her family, had reduced her to an interloper, a gold digger who had overstepped her station. The familiar weight of grief pressed down on her chest, but something else was building underneath it. A slow-burning resolve. The next morning, under a gray and heavy sky, Rachel found herself driving to Arlington Memorial Hospital. For 3 decades, these corridors had been her second home. After she had to be on leave during Walter's final weeks, she felt like a visitor in her own domain. She made her way to the hospice wing. The familiar antiseptic smell, the hushed voices, the gentle beeping of monitors, all reminded her of the hundreds of patients she had guided through their final journey. Including, ultimately, her husband. "Rachel. We didn't expect you back so soon," said Diane, the head nurse, embracing her warmly. "Just visiting," Rachel replied. "I needed a familiar place." They spoke briefly about Walter, about the funeral. Rachel considered mentioning the eviction but couldn't bring herself to share that humiliation. As she was leaving, Diane touched her arm. "Noah was here yesterday, you know. He asked about you." Rachel froze. "Noah? Here?" He seemed concerned. "Said he'd been trying to reach you but couldn't get through." "Did he say anything else?" "Just that he needed to talk to you about Walter's final wishes." "I assumed you knew." Rachel's mind raced. Noah came to look for her there. Walter's final message suddenly gained new meaning. Observed Noah. Later that afternoon, Rachel arrived at the imposingly elegant and cold office of Westridge Legal Group in search of answers. Rachel felt underdressed in her simple blouse and pants as the receptionist led her to Andrew Peterson's office. Peterson, a college friend of Walter's, had handled their wills and estate planning. His expression was sympathetic but guarded as she entered. "Rachel, I was going to call you. I'm so sorry about Walter." "Thank you, Andrew. But I think you know why I'm here." She placed the legal notice on his desk. "Edith is trying to force me out of my home." He examined the document, frowning. "This isn't from our firm." "I know. It's from Harrison Blackwell." Peterson's eyes narrowed. "Harrison represents Edith personally, not the Foster estate." He leaned forward. "Rachel, did Walter ever mention contingency plans to you?" "He left me a recording." She explained what she had found, watching Peterson's expression shift from concern to calculation. "That's illuminating, but legally problematic as evidence. Walter created a trust in your name, but there are terms that He hesitated. Let's just say Edith is trying to contest certain conditions. What conditions? I can't discuss that without. He was interrupted by his phone. After checking the caller ID, he excused himself. While waiting, Rachel noticed a photograph on Peterson's bookshelf. Walter, Peterson, and a few other men on a fishing trip. The same tackle box that now sat in her apartment was visible in the background. When Peterson returned, his manner had changed subtly. Rachel, I think you should speak with Noah before we proceed further. There are developments I'm not at liberty to discuss. As she left the office, Rachel's professional instincts, honed by years of reading between lines in difficult family situations, told her something significant was happening behind the scenes. Her grief was gradually being channeled into something more focused, more determined. Walter had prepared for this betrayal. Noah was somehow involved. And Rachel was beginning to understand that this fight would require all the strength she had left. Clutching her purse, which contained the recorder, she made a decision. She would contact Noah. And she would prepare for the confrontation that was surely coming. For 30 years, she had been the calm one, the caretaker, the peacemaker. But now, with nothing left to lose, Rachel Foster was ready to fight back. That evening, as determination hardened within her, a small envelope sat on Rachel's kitchen counter. Inside was a handwritten invitation to Edith, Griffin, and Noah Foster. I would like to invite you to dinner at my apartment this Friday evening at 7 p.m. I have some of Walter's personal items I thought we might share. After all, we're still family. Rachel studied her handiwork. The words "still family" had been particularly difficult to write. After meeting with Andrew Peterson, Rachel had learned that Walter had indeed created a separate trust in her name, one Edith couldn't touch. But Peterson was clear, if we can find more conclusive evidence of their intentions, we can secure everything Walter wanted you to have. She placed 3 framed photographs on her mantle, Walter with his sons on their fishing trip, Walter and Rachel on their wedding day, and one of all of them together at Christmas 5 years ago. Those were family moments that have been tainted by betrayal. The next day, seeking comfort in old traditions, Rachel spent the day cooking Walter's favorite dishes, pot roast with rosemary potatoes, the meal she had prepared for his birthday every year. The familiar motions were both comforting and painful. She placed the recorder from the tackle box on her bedside table, alongside a second, smaller device Noah had secretly delivered to her mailbox with a note, "For when you're ready. I'm sorry it took me so long." Rachel changed into a simple blue dress, Walter's favorite. She touched her silver locket, drawing strength from it, then arranged 3 place settings at her small dining table. The doorbell rang precisely at 7. Moments later, with an air of judgment, Edith entered first, her eyes sweeping critically over the modest apartment. Griffin followed, a forced smile plastered on his face. Noah came last, his gaze meeting Rachel's with a mixture of apprehension and resolve. "How quaint," Edith remarked, looking around with barely concealed disdain. Dinner began with awkward silence, but the silence was interrupted by Griffin's attempts at small talk. Rachel noticed how he dominated the conversation, speaking of business deals and future plans for the family company, plans that pointedly excluded her. Edith picked at her food, occasionally making comments about the excessive seasoning, or questioning if the meat was properly done. Noah ate quietly, his eyes darting between his grandmother, his brother, and Rachel. When Edith and Griffin exchanged a meaningful glance after Rachel mentioned Walter's prized possessions, Noah's knuckles whitened around his fork. As the meal progressed, Edith and Griffin grew more relaxed, clearly believing Rachel had accepted her fate. Edith even smiled when Rachel served Walter's favorite apple cobbler for dessert. "You know," Edith said, dabbing her lips with a napkin, "I was thinking of selling the house. Too many memories. Griffin has found a lovely property in Westport that would be perfect for me." Rachel nodded, her face carefully neutral. Before we discuss the future, I thought we might revisit the past. With steady hands, and a heart pounding beneath calm words, Rachel placed the voice recorder in the center of the table. Before we talk about Walter's belongings, there's something I'd like you to hear. She pressed play. Walter's voice filled the room, followed by Edith and Griffin discussing their plans to remove Rachel from the house. Edith's face tightened momentarily before she regained her composure. What exactly is this supposed to prove? Some garbled conversation taken out of context. This is just the beginning, Rachel said softly. She glanced at Noah, whose expression had grown increasingly tense. The next recordings come from a different source. Someone in this room. Rachel pressed play on the second device. This recording was crystal clear. Edith's voice. Harrison says we can challenge the trust if we move quickly. We can't let that woman take what belongs to this family. Griffin. What about Noah? He's always been soft where she's concerned. Edith. Noah will do as he's told. The house, the investments, everything stays with blood relations, as it should be. As the cold words lingered in the air, the atmosphere in the room transformed as the recording continued to play. Edith's face contorted with rage and disbelief. Griffin stared at Noah with growing fury. Noah sat rigidly, his eyes fixed on Rachel with a mixture of fear and determination. Rachel closed her eyes, listening to the evidence of their betrayal. Occasionally a tear escaped, but with each damning word, a strange peace settled over her. The truth, however painful, was finally being exposed. When the recording ended, silence hung heavy in the air. Griffin pointed an accusing finger at Noah. It was you. You recorded us. Noah stood slowly. I put the same recorder Dad was using in the room. His voice trembled but grew stronger. The night you kicked Rachel out of the house, I saw Dad cry. He didn't say anything, but I knew. I had to do something. The words hit like a thunderclap, and in a burst of uncontrolled rage, Edith suddenly shrieked at Rachel, her careful poise completely shattered. Caroline had class. She came from a good family, had proper education, was worthy of our social standing. Her voice rose as years of resentment poured out. I was like a mother to those boys after she died. I protected this family, our legacy, our home. And then you, a caretaker, becomes the inheritor? Preposterous. Do you know what Walter told me when he first brought you home? Edith continued, her voice venomous. He said, Mother, Rachel makes me happy. As if that were enough. As if happiness mattered more than duty, than family name, than proper connections. Noah stepped between his grandmother and Rachel. What do you think makes a real family? He asked quietly. Rachel raised us. She was there for every school event, every heartbreak, every achievement. She's our mother in every way that matters. As the weight of those words hung in the air, Griffin remained silent, his calculating mind clearly reassessing the situation now that their plans had been exposed. The legal trust Walter established for me is valid, Rachel said calmly. With these recordings, Andrew Peterson assures me that any challenge to the will would fail spectacularly. Noah moved to stand beside Rachel. I've already spoken to the lawyer. I'm supporting Rachel's claim. Griffin finally spoke, his voice cold. You're taking sides. The whole idea of a friend or foe is crazy, Noah said. We're supposed to be a family. Edith stood abruptly, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. You ungrateful boy. After everything I've done for you. What exactly have you done? Noah asked. Besides trying to control us? Besides treating the woman who loved and cared for your son feel unwanted? Besides dishonoring Dad's final wishes? Edith paled. Without another word, she gathered her purse and headed for the door. Griffin followed her after a moment's hesitation. In the sudden silence after their departure, Rachel and Noah remained at the table. "I'm sorry," he said simply. "I should have stood up to them sooner." Rachel reached across the table and took his hand. "You did when it mattered most." 3 weeks later, with bittersweet emotions swirling within her, Rachel stood in the foyer of the foster home, her home, legally secured through Andrew's swift actions. The familiar scent of lemon polish and old wood greeted her, but something was missing. Walter. Legal victory had restored her property but not her peace. The house felt both intimately familiar and jarringly different, like a beloved song played in the wrong key. Rachel moved through the rooms slowly, trailing her fingers over surfaces. In the master bedroom, Walter's pillow remained indented, preserved by Mrs. Peterson despite Edith's instructions to clear everything out. Rachel pressed her face against it, searching for any lingering trace of his scent, but found only the smell of clean linen. In the formal living room, Edith's presence lingered more persistently than Walter's. The rigid furniture arrangement, the antique display cases filled with foster family heirlooms, the heavy drapes that kept the sunlight at bay, all of it bore Edith's stamp of cold elegance. Rachel sat in Walter's reading chair, surrounded by remnants of a life that no longer existed. The victory felt hollow. What was a house without the people who made it a home? Determined to create something new from the old. The renovation began on a Tuesday. Rachel started with Edith's formal living room, the heart of her territory in the house. The heavy velvet drapes came down first, letting April sunlight flood the space for what felt like the first time in decades. Next came the furniture, the uncomfortable Victorian settee and matching chairs, the glass-topped tables that Walter had always feared breaking. Rachel kept a few meaningful pieces but donated most to a local historical museum. The walls, painted a somber burgundy under Edith's direction, were transformed with a warm cream color. Contractors installed large bay windows and a glass ceiling section, creating the perfect environment for what Rachel had planned. "It's the sunroom," she explained to Mrs. Peterson, who had stayed behind. "This house needs more light, more life." Plants began arriving by the dozen: ferns, palms, flowering orchids, and Walter's favorite, peace lilies. Rachel arranged them carefully, creating a green sanctuary in what had once been the coldest room in the house. While transplanting a particular beautiful orchid, her trowel struck something hard in the soil. Curious, Rachel dug carefully around the object and unearthed a small ceramic plate, caked with dirt. After cleaning it gently, she saw some childish writing on it: "Foster Family Garden." Rachel recognized Noah's uneven penmanship from when he was about 7. She remembered the story Walter had told her, how he'd taken the boys to a pottery painting class after Caroline's death, trying to create new traditions to help them heal. Rachel placed the small plate in the center of her new garden, a bridge between past and present, pain and healing. Not long after, on a crisp afternoon, Noah's voice was warm as he welcomed Rachel into the apartment he shared with his wife Haley. The modest two-bedroom in the city was a conscious rejection of the foster family's ostentatious wealth, one of many reasons for the rift between Noah and his grandmother. Haley embraced Rachel with genuine affection. "It's so good to see you. Coffee?" As they settled in the small living room, Noah seemed nervous, fidgeting with his wedding band. "We have some news," he finally said, looking at Haley with a smile. Haley's hand moved instinctively to her still flat stomach. "I'm pregnant," she said softly. "Due in November." Rachel's hand flew to her mouth. "Walter's first grandchild," she whispered, tears welling in her eyes. The bittersweet joy of the moment, Walter's continuation, his absence, overwhelmed her. Later, as Haley busied herself in the kitchen, Rachel asked Noah the question that had lingered since the night of the confrontation. "When did you start the recordings?" Noah sighed. "After Dad's condition worsened. I overheard Grandma and Griffin talking about the house, about you." I couldn't believe it. He looked down. "That mechanical whirring you heard was Grandma's air purifier." Dad gave me a recording unit too. He made me promise. Promise what? To protect you. He said, your grandmother values appearance over substance, Griffin values money over people, but you, Noah, you see what matters. Haley returned, settling beside Noah. Even when Edith was cold to me, you were the only one who would look me in the eye and say, you belong here. Rachel. Haley squeezed Rachel's hand. That's when I knew there was salvation in this family. In the months that followed, carrying Walter's spirit forward. The Walter Foster Memorial Scholarship for Palliative Care Nursing was established with a $500,000 endowment. Rachel stood at the podium during the announcement ceremony at Arlington Memorial Hospital, her voice steady despite the emotion of the moment. Walter believed that how we care for people in their final days reveals the true nature of our humanity, she told the assembled crowd. This scholarship will ensure that compassionate, skilled nurses continue to provide dignity and comfort to patients and families during life's most challenging transition. The first recipient, a young man who had lost his mother to cancer, reminded Rachel of herself 30 years earlier, determined to transform personal loss into professional purpose. Returning to work brought Rachel's own healing. She found comfort in the rhythms of patient care, in making difficult moments more bearable for others. Her colleagues welcomed her back with understanding and support, creating space for her grief while valuing her expertise. One evening, while searching for financial documents in Walter's desk, Rachel discovered a small box labeled, "Open when the time is right," in his handwriting. Inside lay another voice recorder, smaller than the first. Rachel's hand hovered over it. What kind of message had Walter left this time? What would hearing his voice now, months after his death, do to the fragile peace she was building? She wasn't ready. Not yet. Some wounds were still too fresh, some emotions too raw. Carefully, she returned the recorder to its box and placed it in her bedside drawer. Unlike Edith, who had tried to erase Walter's choices, Rachel would respect his timing. The message would wait until she was strong enough to receive it. That night, as she watered the thriving plants in her sunroom, Rachel felt something shift within her. The grief remained, a constant companion, but it no longer consumed her. Life was continuing, in the green leaves unfurling toward the light, in the child growing within Haley, in the scholarship that would extend Walter's compassion far beyond his lifetime. For the first time since Walter's diagnosis, Rachel found herself thinking about tomorrow with something like hope. 1 year later, under a wide, open sky. Rachel stood on the porch of her new home, watching waves roll gently onto the shore. The small Cape Cod-style house, painted a soft blue-gray like the ocean on a cloudy day, sat just 200 yards from the beach. The legal battles had finally ended 3 months earlier. Edith's attempts to challenge Walter's trust had failed spectacularly once the recordings were presented in court. Griffin had eventually dropped his opposition, perhaps recognizing the futility of the fight, or perhaps influenced by Noah's unwavering support of Rachel. Rachel had sold the Foster family home, unable to find peace within its walls despite her renovations. The proceeds, combined with Walter's substantial insurance policy, had allowed her to purchase this seaside sanctuary and convert part of it into a retreat space for hospice nurses needing respite from their emotionally demanding work. The porch faced east, offering unobstructed views of the horizon where water met sky, a perfect metaphor for her new life, poised between what was and what might be. Inside, the house was warm and inviting, with comfortable furnishings and large windows that welcomed light. Rachel had brought only a few items from her former home: Walter's fishing tackle box, the ceramic Foster family garden plate now serving as a bird bath in her new garden, and photographs, carefully selected memories of happier times. As she lingered in a moment of reflection, the doorbell chimed, pulling Rachel from her thoughts. Her housewarming party was beginning. Colleagues from the hospital arrived first, bearing plants and wine, exclaiming over the retreat space she had created in the guest wing. "This is exactly what we need," said Diane, the head nurse. "Somewhere to decompress, to remember why we do this work." As Rachel was showing her former supervisor the meditation garden, another arrival caught her attention. Noah stood in the doorway, Haley beside him holding a tiny bundle wrapped in a yellow blanket. "We wanted you to meet someone," Noah said, his face alight with the particular glow of new parenthood. Rachel froze, overwhelmed by the unexpected sight. Haley stepped forward, gently transferring the 4-month-old baby into Rachel's arms. "This is Penelope," Haley said softly. "Walter's granddaughter." "Dad would have wanted to be here for this," Noah added, his voice thick with emotion. "He would have wanted her to know you." Rachel looked down into the baby's face. Penelope had Walter's eyes, the same warm brown that had first captivated Rachel all those years ago. The baby gazed back at her solemnly, then reached up a tiny hand to touch Rachel's cheek. In that moment, something that had been tightly wound inside Rachel for a year began to unravel. Tears spilled down her cheeks as she held Walter's continuation, this new life that carried his legacy forward. Later that evening, as laughter faded into quiet, Noah, Haley, and Penelope remained. Noah disappeared to his car, returning with a cardboard box. "I found these when we were clearing out my old apartment," he explained, placing the box on Rachel's coffee table. "I thought you should have them." Inside were dozens of family photographs spanning decades, Walter as a young father with infant Noah and Griffin, holiday gatherings, school events, and vacations. Rachel's hands trembled as she sifted through them, stopping at one particular image. The photograph showed Rachel sitting on a park bench, a 5-year-old Noah on one side and an 8-year-old Griffin on the other. All three were laughing, ice cream cones dripping in the summer heat. Rachel remembered the day clearly, her first outing alone with the boys after marrying Walter. "I've always thought of you as my mother," Noah said quietly. "But it took me too long to say it out loud. To stand up for that truth." Rachel squeezed his hand. "The past doesn't disappear. But the future can be changed." After the house grew quiet once more, Rachel sat alone on her porch, listening to the rhythmic sound of waves against the shore. The night was clear, stars scattered across the dark sky like diamond dust. From her pocket, she withdrew the small box she had found in Walter's desk a year ago. The time felt right at last. With steady fingers, she opened it and removed the tiny recorder. Walter's final message to her. She pressed play. Walter's voice, stronger than in the other recordings, filled the night air. "Rachel, when you hear this, I'll be gone. But there are things I need to say. You are the pride of my life. Thank you for caring for me until the end. You are my real family, blood means nothing compared to what we shared. I know what Noah has been doing. He has been trying to protect you, as I would have wanted." Rachel closed her eyes, letting Walter's voice wash over her like the nearby waves. "Please tell our grandchild about me. I want to watch over him or her. When he or she is older, tell him or her the stories about the fish we caught with that old tackle box. That way, I'll always be alive in my own little way." Tears streamed down Rachel's face, but they were different from the tears she had shed a year ago, cleansing rather than corrosive. "Please live your life, Rachel. Not just surviving, but truly living. And sometimes, look back on our memories together." The recording ended, leaving only the sound of the ocean. Rachel clutched Walter's wedding ring, which she had worn on a chain around her neck since his death. With a deep, steadying breath, she carefully removed the chain and ring, placing them in a small wooden box along with his letters and the recorder. But unlike Edith, who had tried to lock away the past according to her preferences, Rachel left the box unlocked and open on her side table, a testament to her readiness to honor the past while embracing the future. The next morning, bathed in dawn light, Rachel called Noah. "Why don't you bring Penelope over this Sunday?" she suggested. "I've been sorting through your dad's fishing gear. Maybe someday she'd like to use it." After hanging up, Rachel moved to the sunroom she had created in her new home. The Foster family garden plate sat in the center, surrounded by new green shoots, plants she had started from cuttings taken from her former sunroom. As the morning light strengthened, Rachel touched the ceramic plate gently. Family isn't defined by blood or by legal documents. It is built through love, sacrifice, and shared memories, both painful and joyful. Outside, the tide was coming in, water advancing up the beach in gentle waves. Rachel opened the windows, letting the salt air fill her lungs. At 59, she was starting again, creating a new life shaped by but not defined by grief. On her desk lay applications from 3 hospice nurses seeking short sabbaticals at her retreat. On her calendar was a lunch date with Haley and baby Penelope. And in her heart was a quiet certainty that Walter would have approved of the woman she was becoming, not just a widow preserving memories, but a woman still capable of growth, of service, of love. The temperature of her grief had finally begun to cool, making space for new warmth to enter.